All right, so welcome everybody to our FxD monthly meeting. This is a slightly different meeting this month. We listen to people's calls for trying to share some of their information and connect and have that catalyzing connection by talking about work with the form of a PechaKucha. So tonight's going to be exciting to be able to feature 6 different speakers for that. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. The FxD community acknowledges the 𝐐𝐤-𝐤-𝐤𝐷 as the First Nation owners of the lands where FxD began. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits, and we recognize that these lands were never ceded. All right, so as I mentioned, everybody talked and we listened. We want to be able to highlight some of the fantastic work and research that a lot of you are doing. So tonight is our first PechaKucha, which means chit chat, I think, as a lot of you know. It's a style of presentation where people feature 20 slides and doing 20 seconds of talking for each. So it's a really great way of kind of flying through information, but being able to highlight some of the interesting bits, getting to know each other in a quick format. So we were originally going to feature 8 speakers, but we've changed that around a little bit to do 6 speakers. That way we can actually allow for about 1 question per speaker. So that was altered, and I think that'll be a better model going forward. So the plan is to do these quarterly. So we have, of course, today's for March for Q1, and then we'll plan to do another in June and Q2. I already have 3 or 4 speakers who have identified themselves for wanting to do June. So if you're interested, please let me know. We'll get you on that list. I also wanted to let everybody know next month in April, I've been able to secure Daniel Christian Wall, who is fantastic for regenerative futures. We're going to be doing a conversation discussion back and forth with him. So that's the plan for April. And then I'm actually in Europe right now doing some work, and I'm working specifically with a group that focuses on inclusive design and design for all. So I'm planning to have some kind of conversation with them in May before we then have our next June PechaKucha. And then after that, if anybody has any suggested speakers that they'd like to line up for later this year, whether it's in some of the topics mentioned below with indigenous philosophies, biophilic design, etc., please let me know. It doesn't necessarily have to be within those topic subject matters. We can definitely do whatever is of interest to everybody. So please don't be shy. All right, so today we have a lovely lineup of speakers. I'm not going to be doing bio introductions for everybody, but I would like to just highlight everybody by name quickly. We're going to start with Dr. Pamela Studley, and then go to Dr. Dara Cunningham. Then we have Stephen Parker, then David Duane, then Nuria Muñoz, and then Teresa Ribeiro. All right, so that's it for me for sharing right now. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Pam, and let me go ahead and
thanks.
Spotlight for you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
Good morning on my end to everybody. So good day wherever you are. I'm Dr. Pamela Studley, an integrative physician with a background in neuropsychology, child development psychology, nutrition, and other few things. And today I'm going to talk about mind matter and importance on how the mind and body are connected, equally interdependent on one another. One of the things that I want to talk about specifically with mind matter is about our emotions. And we often discuss the way we react to stress, the tension we hold, or even the habits. They're just not yours wholly, completely, so to speak. And these are patterns that have been passed down through generations. But what if you had the power to change them? And I'm hoping it goes to the next slide. But if we have a lot of, there we are. So the big question is your emotions. Some of them were wired even before you were born. And science has shown that emotional patterns, how you handle pressure, how your body holds stress, they're all passed down just like the color of your eyes. We inherit more than just our genes. So the question often people think is, when I have and I'm in my head for emotions, I need to just concentrate on the mind. But that is a bit of half the job done. So like I said, when we inherit more than just our genes, we also inherit behaviors, stress responses, and even the way we breathe. But here's the good news. Just because they were passed down doesn't mean you have to keep them. If they don't serve you, you can change them. You can rewire them. And not just in your mind. You can do it in your body too. Ever felt tension in your shoulders before stress even starts? Or snapped under pressure, or have felt drained for no reason? These are reactions, and these reactions aren't random. They were emotions that were wired into your body and your nervous system. Every time you react the same way, whether it's frustration, suppression, withdrawal, or stress, your nervous system reinforces that response. It's like walking the same path over and over in a forest until it becomes a road, and then it becomes automatic. And once your response is automatic, it affects everything. Your breathing, your posture, your gut, your energy. But there is good news. You can break the cycle, not just in your mind, but also in your body. Your brain is adaptable, but so is your body. The nervous system is constantly reshaping itself based on breath, movement, and sensory inputs. You're never fixed. You're always, always evolving. They say neurons that fire together wire together. But here's the missing piece. Your body also holds patterns. The more you practice a new emotional state through movement, breath, and rhythm, the more your body reinforces it. This is why transformation isn't just about thinking differently. It's about breathing differently, standing differently, and moving differently. The person who always felt anxious can learn to embody calm. Stress can become clarity. Disconnection can shift into balance. Just like you train your muscles for strength, you can train your entire system for resilience. Emotional wiring isn't just in the brain. It's in how you breathe and move, your coordination, your consumption, and also how you regulate your energy. So the don'ts. We rely on quick fixes, coffee to stay awake, alcohol to unwind, junk food for comfort. But these don't just affect the brain. They hijack your entire system, keeping the body in a constant loop of stress. Caffeine late in the day, sugar spikes, ultra-processed foods, all these overstimulate the nervous system, and your body loses its ability to reset and rewire. Lack of movement, dehydration, and sitting for far too long don't just make you stiff. They keep your nervous system in a dysregulated state and locked. The body must move for both the mind and body to heal. And the biggest disruptor, overstimulation leading to overthinking. News, notifications, endless scrolling, that leads to comparison, magnification, and catastrophization. When your mind and body are flooded with noise, they just can't rewire towards calm and clarity. So to rewire, you first need to reset. Breathwork, mindfulness, and vagus nerve activation shift your entire system from a state of stress to that of balance, making deep changes possible. And movement. This isn't optional. Stretching, dancing, even shaking off tension. These actions are known to physically reset old emotional patterns stored in your body and help with the building of new ones. Your brain and gut are one system. What you eat directly impacts your emotions. Nutrient-dense foods, hydration, and gut health support neuroplasticity, while ultra-processed junk simply slows it down. And the foundation, deep, quality, consistent sleep. This is when your nervous system and body repair, rewire, and strengthen new patterns. So without deep rest, no change you make can last. So right now you have two choices. Stay wired in old emotional and physical patterns, blaming it on familial history and genes, or take the first step to rewire your entire system for lasting change. Your emotions live in your body, shaping every breath, movement, and response. So the moment you make that choice, your brain and body start adapting. Your breath shifts, your posture changes, your nervous system listens. The process has already begun with your decision. Mind matter isn't just about rewiring your brain, it's about aligning your entire system. It's why we've developed a unique science-backed framework that helps recode your emotional DNA. The only question now is, will you train it? Thank you.
All right. Great job, Pam.
Thank you.
Hopefully the slides were okay. I realized it wasn't auto advancing, so I had to get my timer out and do it myself. So hopefully it was all right.
Yeah, it was perfect on
We're
the dot.
learning as we go.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any questions for Pam today?
Amy.
All right.
Hi, thanks so
Amy.
much, Pam. I was just wondering what the connection is for you between the work that you're doing and sort of design in a broad sense. What aspects of design do you think relate most to your work?
So one of the things that I have seen and experienced personally is the environment that we live in has a major role to play with the way it affects our emotions. You keep a very dingy, cluttered room. It physically makes you feel like there's something hanging above your head. It creates anxiety in your brain. It creates this very scattered form of even approaching any task that you want to do, just like you have multiple tabs with a lot of notifications popping in and you don't know which one to pay attention to. And your attention goes from one to the other in a very unorganized, not intended or not planned fashion. And that's probably why it's a reflection of how your surrounding is too. So for me personally, I've seen that and I've worked with a lot of clients, starting with their home and then coming up to their body. Thank you.
All right, great. Yeah, Amy, I thought that you might find Pam's presentation interesting. So thanks for your question. All right. All right, thanks for that, Pam. Let's go ahead and move on to Dara. I'm going to change the spotlights around. And if you'd like to begin sharing your screen, that sounds good, Dara.
Thank you. Okay. And
All right, sharing.
and you see
Whenever you're ready to begin.
sharing? Right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, hi, I'm Dara Cunningham. I have dual PhDs in cognitive science and architecture, design and planning. And I have done a lot of research around how we measure people's experience in the built space. One of the things that I found in my research is that while we sometimes do post-occupancy evaluations, most buildings are built and then the architects move on. So there's no checks to make sure that building is actually supporting the people who are in that space. And I think that's a problem. The example I have here is of Hudson Yards in New York City, which look great on the outside, but are being shown to not to have multiple usability problems and not really meet the needs of the people using that space. And I'm checking. It looks like mine is doing the wrong
Yeah, you might just want to auto advance
number of
yourself.
seconds.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to do that. Oops, right. Fast. Okay. So buildings do have a mental health on us, or mental health impact. And here's an example of a building using biophilic design to reduce patient stress. This is the 𝐏𝐤𝐤𝐤 Diabetes Center in Denmark. And we know that a badly designed space can feel like a prison, but a well-designed one can promote healing, like this space. While we have done post-occupancy evaluations, the example I give here is of the Royal Adelaide Hospital. It was state-of-the-art when it was built. It looks great from the outside, but patients have found it stressful and hard to navigate. And that's something that once you've built the building can be difficult to correct, or at least expensive to correct. So it's often not done, not gone back to. I think that we have an opportunity now in a way that we never have before to gather feedback from buildings in use and use that to design better buildings. So as part of my research and part of my doctorate, I developed a system called SIG, it's Socio-Technical Environments for Evolutionary Design, which is a way to collect feedback about buildings in use, similar to what we have here, which is an example of if this was built into Google Maps. People could do a review like they would getting a coffee, but for a $500 million hospital. In addition, I've developed reflective activity systems theory, or RAST, and this is a feedback loop. So we can take a look at what the objective of the building was, then gather information about the outcomes from those objectives, and most importantly, gather information from the people using that space where they can reflect on their experience. We can use that to better design future spaces. And another example is providing design feedback for places like schools for neurodivergent. And here I'm giving an example of the 𝐏𝐞𝐜𝐤 Center, which designed sensory-friendly classrooms using student feedback. So for them, for autistic students, and giving feedback, loud hallways and flickering lights can be overwhelming. If they're able to give that feedback, we can use that to design learning spaces better for them and for others. Sort of a classic that things designed for certain people, particularly with disabilities or different abilities, often are a benefit to everyone. We can also use reflective practice to better develop trauma-informed design. And here is an example of the Friendship Bench project in Zimbabwe. where they've refined mental health spaces based on community input. So in trauma-informed design, feedback isn't optional, it's crucial, and it is part of the design process. With a system like STEED, where we are cataloging and gathering feedback in real time, we can use that to improve future buildings. The example I'm giving here is New York City's Skyline Park, which evolved based on visitor feedback about seating, shade, flow, and other elements. If you give people a way to give feedback, they can give you feedback that can be used for future designs. There is also a movement now with the psychedelic therapy practices being implemented throughout the world. We're in sort of a new psychedelic therapy renaissance, but to provide the right setting, not just for therapeutic settings in general, but for settings where the patient may have an altered state of reality. So providing a safe, comfortable space for people to take that journey. What happens when we ignore feedback? In my research, I did around Buckley Air Force Base in Denver. The base was designed with simulations that were actually never shown to the building occupants. But what I found in talking to people using these spaces is that because no one asked them about their needs, their energy projections for this LEED platinum space were actually quite a bit off. Much of the building faces the outside, and it was just cold. People were freezing in these spaces. They weren't really designed with that in mind of building occupant comfort. AI can help us in processing huge amounts of data. So with a feedback system for buildings around the world, AI could analyze thousands of reports, spotting patterns in hospitals or classrooms or offices or residential spaces, any space that we're in. And an example of beginnings of this type of project are MIT's Cityscope AI, where they are trying to predict stress points and help redesign public spaces using feedback. With a system like STEED that incorporates feedback from many spaces, this means that buildings could potentially adapt. So going through that feedback, particularly with an AI model, we could detect high stress or negative sentiment in different spaces and make adjustments to try and accommodate those occupants in a real-time way. AI is being used in sensory smart hospitals. Google's Project Starline uses AI to create calming virtual windows in therapy rooms to give the feeling of actually being in a room with your therapist or with your client. So it's not just about being efficient, but it's also about providing a sense of safety and well-being and connection. AI can also be used to help us with sustainable design. And the Living Building Challenge is an example of that, where we're integrating AI to optimize energy use and well-being. So with the idea that sustainability isn't just about solar panels, AI-driven buildings use less energy, provide better air, and adjust in real time to occupant needs. Why developers should care is that better buildings aren't just good for people, they're good for business. So in this example, there is it's called 𝐐𝐤-𝐤-𝐷𝑒. It's an AI system for hotels and hospitality settings to gather feedback from occupants there. And we all know that that means happier people in the space generally means better business and more people returning. So some people are starting to get that message. There are concerns with privacy and ethics of AI and architecture. In fact, the Sidewalk Labs Smart City project in Toronto was canceled due to public backlash over data privacy concerns. But if we can collect the data and collect it anonymously and maybe not even collect it tied to a specific space for public consumption, then we still have an ability to collect that data and use it to apply useful feedback in a timely manner. And here's an example of Singapore's Smart Nation. This project uses AI and Internet of Things to optimize traffic flow, green spaces, and accessibility. So you can imagine that if an entire city was using a system like STEED to gather feedback about the city, that could drive AI smart city planning and better planning for walkability, green spaces, and adaptive lighting. We have an opportunity to develop those smarter, healthier spaces by using the technologies that are available to us now. And here's an example of the University of British Columbia's Brock Commons Tallwood House, which is a super sustainable building and known for providing better well-being for students on campus. So that's something that was achieved through technology. And I'll ask all of you, what's the worst space you've been in? If you think about that, and if you had the opportunity to share your experience with someone, would you have done that? And we've all experienced bad design, but not had recourse to give feedback on it.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Yeah, we definitely went over with that time, so I think we might have to table the questions. I didn't want to interrupt as we were partway through, but yeah, thank you so much. That was really well done. Very interesting content for sure. If anybody has any questions for Dara, maybe put it in the chat and then she can answer those directly so that we don't overlook that opportunity. But I would like to keep things going because we're going to be quite tight on time. Stephen, you want to go ahead and get going then? I will spotlight you.
Sure thing.
Thanks. All right, it's all you.
Dun-dun-dun. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, both
Okay.
good.
Now, if I look like I'm eating my microphone, I apologize because it's the only way you'll be able to hear me in this airport lounge, so I apologize ahead of time. Stephen Parker, architect and mental and behavioral health planner at Stantec, International's capital. I like to do a lot of pro bono projects on my spare time when I'm not trying to build a 3-generation home. Even though my son Jack, who's almost 2 years old, is not quite the jack of all trades, he's still eating the screws, not necessarily handing them to daddy at this point. I think we'll have plenty of projects in the future to play with. I think it's always good to ground yourself in your sense of purpose. For me, that was an education in the VA system, helping develop their inpatient mental health design guide. So if you want, I don't know, 500 plus pages in mental health design, it's a great way to go to sleep at night. To flip through that real quick, QR code, publicly available document. But for me, it was one way which it educated myself on projects that I now tackle at Stantec around the world, whether it's a 420-bed forensic psych hospital that will transform long-term psychiatric care in Southeast Pennsylvania. addressing the stigma and defying deinstitutionalization by design. I think it's really important for us to think about all those moments where we can listen to the end user who may not have a voice in the process, and how we can craft co-production and co-design for those little moments in the chapel, or to take a time to socialize, or have the choice to socialize or self-reflect in your own space, and how to do that with dignity and grace. And so I look to academia to inform a number of my different project types, whether it's crisis care centers that look to decentralize from a nursing station to have charting out and about in a milieu space, so that peer support specialists can work with patients who are at an active crisis, and do so in a space that is not an overburdened ED or a law enforcement setting. So we do that all over the country. We've actually written a book on these standards for a client, and thinking that we need to do better to drive meaningful change at scale through design. And so we try to leverage what best practices we do know around mental and behavioral health. Of the 100 or so studies that directly relate to psychiatric environments, we can do a lot better, because there are a lot of emerging trends that are developing, whether it's around trauma-informed design or neuroaesthetics. You're seeing this greater integration across practices to take what academia is doing and try to experiment with different communities and different contexts with different cultures, and trying to report back as to what their best practices can be in those settings, whether it's for a community dealing with addiction for veterans, or for unhoused seniors and adults in a setting that is rehabbing what was a stigmatized indigent population that was relegated to the corner of a city, and opening it back up as a public park, to working with the largest academic medical centers in the country and the world to move neurological care and use the building as a tool for diagnostics. So a patient, when they walk through the door of this institute, their gait is actually checked, and by the time they get to their exam room, the building is informing the diagnostics of the consultation that occurs. But you have to balance your empathy with empirical data. So I work with a friend of mine with lived experience to do a sketching workshop around mental health, trying to draw out stigma by giving anyone who is a designer a pen and say, design for those that are most vulnerable in your lives and your communities, and put pen to paper. This means that we can also transform the skyline of major cities when we look to do massive projects, as well as the most intimate ones, whether it's 112 inside mid-psych beds at 330,000 square meter hospital, Canada's largest, in Toronto, creating intimate moments as well as community ones, to trying to move research forward by integrating AI and mockups, so that way the user experience is informed by the community and context, and we're utilizing AI as a tool that assists us and doesn't make us fear it in and of itself. Taking the process that we do around low fidelity spaces like this, and transforming AI as a tool to be really informative and playful, whether it's looking at the workplace of the future, so that the space around you can craft to your own needs for sensory inputs or stimuli avoiding situations, so that you can reach your peak flow for you, as well as your different teammates, your tasks, and your clients, whether it's crafting sensory spaces for K-12 settings, for a child who might be struggling with social anxiety or stress. How do you can craft these spaces, not just in a single sensory environment, but through sensory-enabled architecture in a variety of classroom settings where they might be most vulnerable, but you want to be accessible with the hyper. And this means that we also look to experiment with pop-ups like sensory experiences with the Zenden, so that we can test these things real world with educators and students. We're going to do this pop-up in Bryan ISD in Texas later this year and get data from that, and then evolve it into a higher education setting. So that way we're looking to be a research-informed practice and a practice-informed research at the same time. That way we can implement these quicker and learn from them faster, and fail faster and learn better. We find that we do a lot with trying to translate what is going on in academia to research, and how as we as practitioners can be an active and participant in that process, whether it's doing something that is a built work that you can see and experience and touch along the way. Or if it's addressing generational trauma in indigenous communities, like this one in the far Arctic, where instead of taking an individual out of a toxic environment on the road to recovery, you take the entire family and kinship unit into inpatient generational care. mom, dad, aunt, uncle, and you seek to address the disconnection between culture and language. But I wanted to leave you all with a charge, and that is in any project that you have in the built environment, you can add one of these signs for 988 in a parking lot or somewhere and help someone who needs access to care, can call someone, find someone to talk to, someone can come get them, and they can go someplace safe. So I will leave you with that. Hopefully that was 20 seconds for each one. But thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks, Stephen. Well done. All right, do we have any quick questions for Stephen? You get rewarded for timeliness with a question, maybe.
A lot, I know.
All right, Amy, you were first at the gate.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. You mentioned there are about 100 papers in mental health designing for mental health in patient settings. I'm wondering, from a practice point of view, are there any big gaps for you in where the research doesn't inform practice enough, where you've still got to guess and where more evidence would be required? Thanks.
A lot of different areas. Besides the context and cultural conditions and constraints for your project and community setting, consultation rooms, dual entry or single entry. What is more trauma informed? What is safer for a provider? We get a lot of tension there. What is the optimal length of a corridor in a psychiatric setting in different scenarios for response time, to recognize someone down the hallway, to hear them well enough, and otherwise give staff the ability to reach a patient in need, besides just good line of sight to know that something is happening, but you can actually identify that visual and what's going on. You know, we've had some great research around Ulrich and Mardell Shepley and others that have informed various aspects of mental and behavioral health. I think there's a deeper understanding about what is a good design, what's a post-occupancy evaluation, what is a continuing occupancy evaluation, to make sure that we get good data throughout the lifespan of a building, because as cohorts change, we get many different needs out of a building to need to be flexible. But that also means, how flexible can I design now for a future state that is a big question mark? So those are kind of three buckets I can think of off the bat.
Cool.
All right. Thanks all. Thank you so much, Stephen. We're going to hand off to David now. Appreciate it. All right. And David, I will drive for you. So let me go ahead and bring that up too.
Perfect. Thank you. Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. When are you ready?
Yep, this is a proposal for something called the Collins score, which is a metric for tracking human flourishing in the workplace. This is not something that exists, but it's something that I'm stealing from somebody else and trying to suggest that designers across different disciplines maybe and offices can share this together. It's not even something that I feel like real ownership over. But what I would love to talk about today, I'm like trying to time this so that when it advances, I'll get it. Yeah, okay, so what I want to talk about today is like basically the background on this. Just for those of you who've never met me, some of you I know from other events. My name is 𝐏𝐞𝐜𝐤-𝐟𝐵. I'm the Chief Experience Officer of Physical Space. I'm an architect, and my company Genie brings together UX architecture, physical space architecture, and change management, and we use UX style research. So something like a metric that's a basis for decision making is really important, which is why I found the Collins score. And this is going to run through the context of where I found it, define the metric, suggest how to measure it, talk about its relevance very briefly, and then speculate on, you know, some positive things that could happen. I stole this from Jim Collins. I heard him on an interview about 5 or 6 years ago, and he was describing different like work habits and the way he sort of tracks his life and tracks his like productivity and creativity. And it occurred to me that like Jim Collins is operating on the very high end of flourishing himself, and this is like his system exactly. He opens a spreadsheet at the end of every day when he kind of shuts down, and he fills in 3 columns. Column 1 is just, what did I do today? Bullet points of the activities. Column 2, he tracks quote unquote creative time. the number of hours, and then 3, which is just highly focused time, and then 3, he rates his day on a scale of -2, -1, 0, +1, +2. And so my background as an architect is in high performance buildings. Like, for example, I worked on like several zero energy buildings, and these were always like extremely objective. Like, you have metrics like literally zero energy in the name of the building that talks about like its performance. And like when you're talking about flourishing in buildings, it's like very difficult to pin something on because it's so, social sciences based. So anyway, I was trying to think of like on the 𝐤𝐤 scale, like a +2 is the highest you can get. Like, what would it be a +2 office? How can you create like an environment that promotes flourishing? Can the physical space make you happier, more creative, more engaged? And then can you track that with like the pulse of a metric that is measuring your flourishing? So like, if you like baseline, if you were trying to create an office like this, you'd have to baseline like where everybody's at. So I just took Colin's scoring system and then created this numerical scale between -2 and +2, and like it's a subjective feeling. So how would you track it? Basically create some kind of an app that would trigger two questions in the morning. What time are you going to shut down? What would you have to do to achieve +1, which is baseline flourishing? And then at the end of the day, what would you like? How would you rate your day? How many hours of creative time did you get? And like, why would you rate the day that way? So I started doing this like 6 years ago personally, and I can tell you, as like contributed immensely to my own flourishing. I started doing this like with my mentor, so it was like fun to share like this data immediately. I've identified like what causes me to go negative, and I avoid that like the plague. And I've created manageable +1 targets and basically hit them day after day after day. So the results, if you track in this way, is that you get like 2 qualitative measures and 1 quantitative measure every single day, almost in no time. Like, pretty significant patterns emerge. And then over time, I think you just develop a habit of like surfacing what contributes to your own positive or negative sort of patterns of flourishing. In terms of like the data flow, I think this data should be private. Like, you should be able to, the tracker, who's ever tracking it, should be able to take it forever from between companies and own it. Your HR doesn't necessarily wouldn't have access to it unless you shared it with them for some reason. But like, you can choose who you share it with in like specific ways. So for example, I'll run through a couple of sharing scenarios. The high trust people, like for me, my mentor, my leadership coach, close partners that I work on at work, or that I work on my company with, I would show them my data, my entire dashboard. And I would want to know theirs. I would want to be alerted if somebody's getting a +2 day, like an awesome day. What are we celebrating? -2 day. What can I help you with? Or if you're languishing in a chain of like zeros. And then, so like, I think you could also share in a team scenario if you have enough trackers to like have it be meaningful. You could pool, like you could anonymize that data, pool it, and then make decisions about your workplace that would involve, collective input that would drive everybody's column score to go up. So it's like a very clear example. This is an underutilized space in our office in Chicago. It's very beautiful, overlooking the river, right? 𝐐𝐤-𝐤𝐤𝑚. And like, nobody uses the space. And like, somebody hides there and eats lunch and like jams out some emails. But like, what I want to do is get a bunch of people in my office like using this tracking system, and then say like, what could we reposition this portion of the office to do that has the maximum potential of like upping our collective column score. So in a larger scenario, you could expand that to like an entire company. Like, imagine if every, Wells Fargo did this across, their 20,000 or 200,000 employees or something. Huge initiatives that are rolled out throughout the company. You could see like the needle move on that score, right? And then a fourth and final scenario is like an AI agent scanning your data over years and years and years, and like suggesting patterns about your behavior, like a chess engine or something. And then in an advanced tracking state, you could just tie this to your calendar and your communication tools, and like even develop like probably finer grain correlation. So like, my big dream is that if you could correlate higher amounts of focus time, highly creative time, what Cal Newport talked about is deep work, to a higher column score, that'd be great. And if you correlate a higher column score to overall better business performance, either for individuals or entire teams, that would be like the holy grail, And a few obvious critiques is that it's super subjective. you know, like, how did I feel today? Was that based on like, you know, whether or not somebody sent me a nasty text? I find that that stuff gets kind of flushed out over days and days and weeks of tracking. Those are kind of anomalies. The link to focus time, people have like questioned whether or not that's like really important, and that there are already a bunch of trackers. Anyway, I have written a white paper on this that's gotten a ton of really interesting feedback from a bunch of people who lead workplace for some of the big like Fortune 500 companies. And I'd be curious for your feedback too. If you want to scan this, it takes you right to the Google Doc. It's only 5,000 words or something like that. And Jenna was like kind enough to offer some thoughts. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Should I answer Amy's question? Do you think? Should I take a shot at that?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't get to my thing, but yes, if somebody has a question, go ahead.
Okay, do you track physical environments along the 4 or 5 questions you propose asking people to drive a score? Yeah, I'm a huge believer that like workplace experience isn't just physical environments. It's like a combination of your technology enabled moments, your physical environments, and your human to human interactions. But the space plays a role. And like, what's the appropriate role? It's whatever enables you to flourish to the max. So yeah, space is a part of it. And I think it should be a malleable, flexible part that you feel like you have agency over.
I guess I just thinking about if you're looking at patterns over time, like how will you identify the aspects that contributed to the, you know, the positive or negative scores on a given day if you're working across different settings on different projects, you know?
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be like taken up in the qualitative side.
But you'd
You
need
know,
to
like you're gonna have to call it out.
Yeah.
Whether or
And
not
full disclosure,
that's
I'm interested in this because I do a very similar thing myself, but I don't have a method of tracking the other circumstances, like you said, the nasty text or the high workload or whatever that might be contributing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So I have this, you know, the outcome data, but I don't have the predictors of it, except just retrospectively going, that was a hard month for me, or I was, you know, working in a, you know, dim office or whatever.
Yeah, I don't want to take more time than it's welcome, but like one of the other things that I think is really compelling, and Zoe Chen from Beltoa made this point to me, which was that over time, those things that gives you +1, +2 days are going to change, you know, decade on decade. So even as your sort of life situation changes, I think like what gives you high scores are going to change. But as long as you're tracking, I think it gives you like a leg up, you know. Cool, thanks.
Great. Yeah, great, David. I'm really happy to see that progress. You know, you had me at data and eudaimonia, so having that all come together really makes me happy. Great work. I'll be curious to see what happens. All right, so because Nuria is unable to join us live, I'm going to be playing a video of hers later. So I'm going to switch it up and have Teresa go next, and you know, she can present live, and then we have everybody here until the end of the hour, and then I could play Nuria's recording afterwards. So let me go ahead and unspotlight David and get Teresa going. So Teresa, you ready?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my presentation. So today I'm Teresa. I'm an architect from Lisbon, Portugal. I'm not talking about my work. I'm a researcher on neuroarchitecture field. And today I will present takeaways from the last event I hosted in Lisbon 2 weeks ago. And with the marvelous presence of Jenna, let's start. So
Whenever you're ready, Teresa.
okay, yeah, you are seeing my presentation now?
Yes,
So
it looks
this
great.
was
Go ahead.
the first International Symposium of Neurourbanism and Neuroarchitecture hosted in Lisbon 2 weeks ago, and I will show you the highlights and takeaways from this marvelous day. I want to thank Jenna for the opportunity to share with you. We start with the neurourbanism project that it's called Emotional Cities. It was a 5 years project funded by the European Horizon 2020, and it aims to map neurophysiological reactions to the urban environment over time and space. And they provide scientific evidence on how urban landscapes influence mental health. You can just add all the data in this web. Maybe this will work. So it's not changing, right?
No, it's not. Just go ahead and advance if it's not.
Okay.
I'll use the timer too if needed. Can you advance to the next one, Teresa? Are you able to?
No, it's not, it's not advancing. I'm sorry. Oh,
All right.
let me try again.
We're learning the hard way with this time
I'm
around.
sorry.
There, you're all good. It's
Okay.
okay. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, so we now know that urban living increased mood disorders, anxiety, risk disorders, risk of schizophrenia, drugs addiction, mental health disorders, affects around 84 million people in the European Union and costs more than 6,000 million of dollars. And the emotional cities, as I said before, they use AI, biosensors, and spatial data. It was an innovative space and time improvement because they use it outside, not just in lab. And it was a very huge specific issue for cleaning all the data, but they just finished with a lot of good information. And one of the most information is that the human cognition and behaviors and mental health are highly impacted by the urban planning. And the urban stresses contribute to depression and cognitive overload. Designing healthier spaces improve health and well-being. And the NeuroArchitect was the second day. We focus on life-centered approach, and we had Sarah Robbins as a speaker, and we were invited to think on how human-centric design is important and switch between the sustainability as a technological problem to the society sustainability, social sustainability. So for that, architecture has a very important play and role in our society. So the main takeaways was the importance of human scales, multisensory sensory experience, textures, movement, sound, shape, shapes our special I'm sorry. It's too fast. So this is the diagrams that Sarah just present and what design can do. They just highlights the rhythmic patterns, prospect and refugee, biophilia, fractals and synchrony, and all the resonance in the embodied. Mental health and well-being in NeuroArchitect is different. The health is different from the absence of disease. So the health is also live long and productive and fruitful life. And well-being is also quality of life. So how in the built environment we can afford well-being by absence reductions of demanding factors, connections and attachment, and promote well-being by fostering restoration and restorative environments. And our beloved Jenna presents eudaimonia flourishing, the two types of flourishing by design, a design approach based on science, with eudaimonic design promoting comprehensive health and well-being for human flourishing, and a community of practice as a cultural kitchen that architecture can beyond promote happiness. And then we had the light, the study of the light and physiological restoration. Light is a biological cue which regulates sleep, mood, and productivity. Light and beauty shape space, while neuroscience depends our understanding. And the biophilic design and regenerative spaces, the difference between sustainable and regenerative design. The nature is essential, not optional. Biophilic design isn't decoration, is a necessity of cognitive restoration, emotional balance, and physiological health. And by Gustavo Jesus is a psychiatrist. It just shows us that how anxiety and depression gets higher in urban areas, and the global burden of depression and the urban stress and mental health that increases 18.4% in 10 years. And then how can we designed for dementia and friendly environments for people, neurodiverse individuals, using color and wayfinding and accessibility to enhance focus, reduce anxiety, and promote inclusivity. And then in the urban design and the crime prevention to urban planning, we added Monica, sociologist from the Lisbon police. She told us that the natural surveillance and lighting reduce criminal opportunities, walkability in communities, and also she told us that the more people that are more exposed are women and health and elders. And in homes also, elders needs to be careful. So the houses that we live in plays a role of cognitive and emotional health and well-being, social interaction and emotion stability. So for this, all principles, we added the well building certificate with the role important in ESG and sustainability and social sustainability. So the standards for health, well-being, and sustainable urban environments, most of them compliance with neuroarchitect. And at the end, we had a neuroscientist that told us that it's very, very challenging measuring only the well-being with neuroscience, that cities and buildings shape behaviors, but it's very challenging because science requires rigorous testing. David was talking about that. Then the last presentation, that we need to be a little more aware of other factors, not just science. You know, the main takeaways, I think, for me, is that the new architecture and impact of society, switching from sustainability and economy and energy to social sustainability. So thank you all. I'm sorry I was a little bit with too much text for reading. I hope you understand. Some questions if you need. Thank you. And this is my key sentences, that we all together making a world a better place for all. Thank you, Jenna.
Great job, Teresa, especially since it's late night your time. So thank you for joining us at this hour in Europe, which is difficult. I'm having difficulty myself just navigating. So yeah, definitely understand. Maybe we'll allow one question for Teresa if anybody has anything. And if anybody wants to see some of the recordings that happened, that was one of the best neuro-related events that I've been to in a really long time. So definitely recommend checking that out if you're able to watch.
Too much information for 20 slides.
I know you jam-packed a lot in there. All right, do we have any questions? I know we're a bit over on time, so thanks everybody for your patience tonight. As we said in the chat, we're learning through this system, so I'll go ahead and collate all the slides myself for next time, and we'll share it more easily that way. Poor David got the short end of my actually being on time with the PowerPoint that I set up, so those were quite quick when I ran through mine. All right, no questions for Teresa? Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and probably share Nuria's recording then. Is that good? Okay, Teresa, I'm going to turn off your spotlight and then I'm going to go ahead and share Nuria's last one. And actually, I wanted to end with Nuria and Teresa because we are thinking about doing a collaboration to start a podcast this year, which is something that we had intimated at in the past. So I thought it'd be good for everybody to get to know Teresa and Nuria in a different way. So this way you can kind of learn a little bit more about their work. Okay, it looks like Teresa's already not spotlit anymore. Maybe somebody already took her off, but hopefully that's all right. Okay, let me prepare to share the video. Okay, and please let me know if this doesn't work. Hopefully everything will be all right.
Around you. So welcome everyone. I'm truly excited to be here today. Before we dive in, let me introduce myself. I'm 𝐐𝐤-𝐤-𝐤𝐤, a well-being and biophilic designer and consultant, and my work is centered around creating spaces that don't just look good, but feel good. Spaces that support well-being, restore balance, and reconnect us with nature. I also lead a community of like-minded professionals who are passionate about bringing well-being design to the forefront. And today, I want to take you on a journey through cities, nature, and the science of well-being, a journey that will change the way you see the spaces around you. So first, I want you to close your eyes for a moment, and now picture yourself in a city. Tall buildings rise on both sides, made of cold glass and steel. The streets stretch ahead, endless and unchanging, and you take a step forward, the pavement beneath you. Your feet is rough and it feels hard. The air is thick and heavy, pressing against your skin. And then the noise. Engines roar, horns beep. You look around. Where is nature? Where is life? A few trees stand in tiny squares of dirt, their roots trapped beneath concrete, their leaves are trapped. And now I want you to imagine a completely different city. You step onto a quiet street. The air is cool and fresh. Tall trees line the sidewalks, their branches stretching overhead. Sunlight filters through the leaves, casting soft dancing shadows. The air smells clean. Like fresh rain and rich soil, a light breeze moves around you, gentle and refreshing. Listen. Instead of honking horns or revving engines, you hear birds singing. Their songs mix with the quiet hum of conversation. And the buildings are different too. Green plants climb their walls like living blankets. Trees and gardens grow on rooftops and balconies. Those buildings don't just stand still, they breathe. They clean air, cool the streets, and make the city feel alive. Ahead, people gather in a beautiful public square. Wooden benches sit beneath big leafy trees. Some people read, some talk, some simply enjoy the moment. This is the future we can create. I grew up in the mountains. My school had big windows that opened to the peaks. During breaks, we ran through the forest, breathing in fresh air. It felt natural, free, even as a child. I knew it felt good, but I didn't know why. So years later, I went through stress, burnout, disconnection, and instinctively, I turned back to nature. That's when I realized nature had always been shaping my well-being. I just hadn't noticed it before. So if nature can do that, imagine what it could do for the spaces we create. We see stress as personal, something to manage alone. But what if it's our environment? 90% of life is spent indoors. Screens, traffic, artificial light, no nature. And it's rewiring our brains. City dwellers have more stress activity in the brain and anxiety and burnout. And this didn't happen overnight. Our disconnection from nature has a history. For most of human history, we lived with nature. Then came industrialization. Concrete replaced greenery. Buildings were made for efficiency, not for well-being. And today, 90% of the time, we are spending in those spaces. And what if our cities could heal us instead of harm us? That's what biophilic design does. It's not just about adding plants. It's about connecting us to nature in ways that restore and nourish us. So we want to learn to know the impact of biophilic design, and this isn't just something we feel. It's something we can measure. It's backed up by thousands of studies in neuroscience, architecture, psychology, and biology, among many others, all proving one thing: humans thrive in connection with nature. In 1984, for instance, Roger Ulrich made a discovery that changed healing. He studied hospital patients. One had a window with trees and the other faced a brick wall. Nature views helped patients heal 30% faster, and they needed less pain medications and had fewer complications. One window, few trees. Great. And if nature helps patients heal, what about children? And classrooms often ignore how environments affect learning. More natural light, better test scores, it reduces stress and improves focus. And the greenery boosts cognitive function. And as kids spend more time indoors, nature in schools matters more than ever. Where do adults spend most of their time? Workplaces. Most offices are built for efficiency, not well-being, leading to stress and burnout. Biophilic offices are giving better well-being, more productivity, and creativity. Healthier offices don't just boost productivity. And think about your city. Does it feel connected or cold and exhausting? By 2050, 70% of people will live in cities, and yet most are disconnected from nature. Biophilic cities aren't just beautiful, they are healthier and more livable. So biophilic design improves well-being in hospitals, schools, workplaces, and cities, but knowledge alone is not enough. The next step is action. We know the benefits, we have tools, we see the success. So why isn't every space designed this way? It's about a better future. And before we end, one final thought. Biophilic design is more than just design. It's about how we shape spaces that shape us. Because nature isn't separate from us. It belongs in our daily lives.
Okay, so that's Noria's presentation. I think that's a lovely place to end. Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to share? Well, it was nice to see everybody. Thank you for joining us at all hours of the day and night. Congratulations to our speakers. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and suffer through the timing debacle of at times, but it's all right. It's a process.
It is.
All right.
Thank you
Looking
for
forward to
having
seeing
me,
everybody
Tanya.
next month. Thank you,
Yes.
Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody. Bye-bye. See you next time.